So I am at Edith Cowan University, and my title is Professor of Human Performance. But what that mostly entails is I do some teaching in research methods and applied biomechanics for strength and conditioning coaches, so in that cohort, and then also research mostly in looking at human performance. And I probably specialize in looking at elite athlete performance or looking at performance of female athletes.
Yeah, my current role is I'm a biomechanist at the IIS, Australian Institute of Sport. That covers quite a few things, I guess, across the way we operate. The primary part of our function is to provide biomechanics servicing to the athletes that come onto the campus, whether they're sort of residential athletes as part of our Centre of Excellence programs or through camp-based activity, where sports will come in for either short or long stay camps to receive servicing and different support while they're on site. And then we also do work with a few other specialised programs, such as the AIS Intensive Rehabilitation Program, which provides support to athletes coming back from severe injuries.
Excellent. So could you give us some examples of the sports that you do work directly with?
The AIS is able to work really with any of the Olympic sports that come through from the high performance system in Australia. So we really have to have a reasonable understanding of a lot of sports that we're working with. So we've worked with sports ranging from archery to volleyball to weightlifting through to cycling, triathlon. Yeah, I'm running out of sports here. There's a heap. So we kind of have to have an understanding of a lot of different sports, and I guess apply our biomechanical knowledge and principles to a large number of contexts.
So I imagine that you haven't learned all of the biomechanics applicable for those sports at university or through your research. So you do have to not make it up, but you do have to learn and invent and make and discover and build things as you're going along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really large part of our job is constant problem solving and critical thinking and applying, I guess, our existing biomechanical knowledge to a large number of contexts, but also learning on the job as well, because we can't know everything about every sport we work with. So yeah, it really is a lot of investigation, a lot of adventure for us on a day-to-day basis, trying to, I guess, provide the best support we possibly can to athletes and coaches.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm a senior biomechanist with the New South Wales Institute of Sport and national lead for biomechanics with Athletics Australia. So it's a joint partnership role, which is very fortunate to be in. So I work with athletics, and particularly track and field, with a wide variety of event groups. So it's not the same thing every day, which is great. And I'm very fortunate that I lead a network of biomechs that work with track and field around the country, and each have great skill sets, great things to offer, and work really well with all the coaches and athletes. So yes, I do enjoy that. It's not sitting at a desk with a computer all the time, and it does challenge you in different ways. Working in an individual sport, you've probably got 10 different event groups, 10 different types of athletes, different coaching needs. So it's really good. Keeps things interesting. So yeah.
Excellent. And you're quite unique in our presenters in that you have just recently returned from Tokyo and been on the ground at the Olympics. Could you give us a couple of sentences? I'm sure there'd be so much to try and talk about if you had the chance. But could you just give us a really quick summary of what that was like to be in that environment, especially given everything that's going on at the moment?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to be part of the Australian Olympic team with the athletics team. So it was my first time in an Olympic team. I've done a couple of different major championships before, with World Championships, World Junior Championships, and ACOM Games. This one was very unique in doing a pandemic on a global scale with it's our biggest benchmark event that performance is critical. So I've been fortunate that I've worked with a lot of the athletes over several years, and what was sort of a bit different with this games is that not many coaches could travel to the games given the restrictions and the pandemic that was going on and just limiting some interactions. So a key part of my role was providing support for coaches remotely in terms of being able to provide video feedback for them so that they could give feedback to their athletes, provide data as they advance through rounds or into finals from qualification. So a big part is capturing a lot of video, doing a lot of number crunching and sending it to the coaches. There's a couple of different forms that it kind of takes. So there's during the competition where you're providing live feedback in some of our technical event groups, but for some of the personal coaches that couldn't be there, it's providing a key connection platform between them at home and to the athlete that's currently in the midst of the competition. So we were very fortunate with the time zone that we were able to do a lot of that. And whilst it was different from not being able to have spectators, it did provide us a little bit of advantage where you could have a coach on FaceTime showing them the athlete WhatsApping the video, athletes watching video, and they can have a conversation during it, which was quite good, which got around a few hurdles from that sense, but technology is great where you can be able to do that. It's sometimes sneaking into areas to be able to get video for coaches of a different angle that you're probably not meant to be in and negotiating your way around. But it's amazing what a little koala can buy you. So yeah, so it's quite handy. But yeah, I was very fortunate to be able to do it. It was an amazing experience to be a part of, where watching all the countries coming together, we were really fortunate that our athletics team had a great campaign. We had several medals, we had lots of top 8 finals. So it was really good. But it was great to be able to go through the full staging camp into the nuttiness that is a major championship, where you're chasing coaches around a stadium, you're up at a ridiculous time, having dinner after midnight, and then somehow sleeping in between and trying to function the next day. So yeah, it was good. So it was exciting, and we had a great group of coaches and athletes, and they're really receptive to using Biomech, which is great. And it's we work quite well as a team, so which is great. And I also was fortunate that our physiologist was traveling as well, so we helped each other out during different periods, because sometimes you can't be in 2 places at once. So yeah, that was good.
Yeah, so I'm head of athletic performance for Australian Women's Sevens team. So we just recently went to Tokyo and finished 5th, which was probably not what we'd hoped for. But prior to that, we were defending gold medalists from Rio. So yeah, my role is that I'm responsible for, I guess, the physical performance of the group. So work with the doctor, the physios, strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists, and football coaches to provide an opportunity for our group and girls to be in the physically the best shape possible to play rugby union sevens, which is a pretty challenging and physically demanding game. So covers a wide array of things, both from a management perspective and then also coaching. But it's really, really challenging but enjoyable role.
Yeah, amazing. So how long have you been in the role? And just so for my clarification, are you working alongside those people, or are you kind of managing those high performance roles?
I manage those high performance guys, along with, obviously, I sit with them and then work with the head coach around how do we implement that. And yeah, I've been there since the start of 2019, so 2.5 years now. And we've got a vast array. We had obviously 8 or 9 returning Olympians from Rio, and then we've obviously got some younger group, I think 7 or 8 under the age of 20 or 21. So vast array of experience within the group, both from a playing and training perspective. So that in itself poses some challenges, but also some interesting opportunities and whatnot along the way as well.
Oh, excellent. So is the level of high performance coaching that's available to the rugby sevens players now, has that been around for a long time? Because I feel like as a observer of the sport, it's really only come onto the scene in the last couple of Olympics. And so yeah, I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I think they centralised in 2014 down here in Sydney, and they were, I think, one of the first female. I think they are the first female national team to be centralised in that space, I think. And so the game's evolved and changed over time. I think historically there was a lot of touch football backgrounds and a lot of multi-sport, talent recycling was going on, and they put together an incredible group in 2014 that obviously went on to win the Olympics. And now I guess the cohort's changed. So girls are growing up now wanting to play sevens for their country, so they've had probably a little bit more experience in rugby union. Probably per se a little bit less multi-sport backgrounds, and so that in itself is a different or an interesting perspective, because you have people that have the rugby skills but per se don't have the physical literacy or physical qualities that you're looking for, as opposed to touch players who tend to have really good running capacities, good skills, good change of direction. So that in itself, as I said, is quite an interesting problem to have to manage. And ultimately the game of sevens is either played over a 2-day weekend where you've got 3 games a day, or the Olympic format, which was 3 days with 2 games per day, and just the physical demands of it, really, really high intensity, 14-minute halves, a lot of high speed, very high speed running in absolute numbers, and a percentage of total game time, and then change of direction, collisions. So it's a really physically challenging sport, and so there's a lot of wear and tear. And so coming back to that original statement around whether you have girls that were centralised and started from multi-sports in 2014 to now, the demands of what they're required to play the game have probably changed a little bit. So the game's got harder, faster, more powerful. And then you've obviously got to try and, develop girls at a younger age to be able to tolerate and compete in those demands.
Oh, that's fascinating. It's such an explosive sport. It's incredible to watch, and backing up game after game, day after day that's just phenomenal.
Yeah, it is. It's a bloody hard sport to play, I think, and when it's played well, it's pretty incredible to watch. But physically, it's certainly challenging.
So I'm a physio by background, so I'm probably coming at it from a slightly different background to a few of the other ones that would sort of classically use sort of biomechanical data. So I was a physio, graduated 2002, and then I started working in professional sport. 2004 was my first year in the NRL, and I was pretty much in it full time up until sort of 2017. And I started a PhD in 2011, which is sort of looking at return to play metrics, particularly around ACL. And what I kind of realized, so it was the whole purpose of doing the research was not sort of classic, like I didn't want to work in a teaching capacity at the university or anything like that. It was really about sort of trying to get more robust ways of kind of informing decision making. So I finished that in 2016. So now my role is kind of a hybrid in the sense that it's not classic. I didn't come from a classic sort of biomechanics sort of stream, sports science. It was really clinician derived, and then all the biomechanics sort of background has all been developed very much from just trying to get more rigor around the things that I have always done, which is try and work out if some levels of risk and whether someone's ready to go back, and very much from a clinical point of view.
Yeah, excellent. And I think it'd be really worthwhile if you could just give us a quick rundown on your pitch ready program that you've developed and operating now out of your practice, if you could do that in a few sentences.
So pitch ready really kind of we tend to use. I love an analogy, as most people know that I do. Sometimes annoyingly, pitch ready is really about informed decision making for return to play, and also trying to set up like injury reduction sort of programs. And the analogy that I tend to use is you've got two broad themes in terms of modifiable risk factors. So you've got the racing car and the racing car driver. The racing car is physical capacity, so how fast you are, how high you jump, all that sort of stuff. And then the racing driver is, someone being able to go really quick around a racetrack and decision making that means they don't kind of crash into the wall. So the biomechanics aspect is really about the racing car. So there's lots of skill components that go into injury risk, in terms of, if you're talking ACL, low knee flexion, where their foot is relative to the center of mass, do they attenuate things around the ankle? So pitch ready is really an attempt to kind of bridge the gap between capturing data and then using that to kind of inform return to play decisions. It's like, I also use it in terms of programming. So there's a whole list of sort of criteria you want people to tick off along the way. So it's about being able to sort of tick those off along the way. So sometimes we'll try and test someone when they're about 70% of the way through their rehab, as a way of kind of setting up the run home. So it's like a dose response sort of method that we're trying to apply, so that really we some things are going really well, some things are still outside of what we deem to be kind of a healthy or an ideal range, and it's really about sort of targeting those kind of in on the run home. So it's really about trying to get people to a peer group level with as many sort of those two big broad themes as possible.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to be in the lab quite a lot. And I do make it a distinct point that even though I could probably sit back and be very professorial and have all my graduate students collect the data, what I find is that your learning through repeated observation is invaluable. So even though it's almost seemingly mundane to sit and collect data repeatedly on hundreds of subjects over thousands of trials, I still relate it back to my coaching experience, is that there is something about repeated observation that teaches you something. And we can't discount this parallel. We talk about the human brain being like artificial intelligence or machine learning, right? The human brain is the platform for that basis, right? We're just programming machine learning to try to replicate our brain. So since we haven't quite nailed that, you might as well use that machine learning that you have. And so I do spend weeks to weeks watching and participating with my graduate students, collecting multiple trials so that I can watch human movement over and over and over again. And it does seemingly allow me to gather hypotheses that we can then test, that I'm not certain I would be able to have the data for my brain to process to arise to those hypotheses. So I probably spend a good half of my time in the lab collecting data or problem solving or playing with the equipment or, all of those things, or mentoring students about data collection and all of the things you've learned to do wrong and how to fix it. Trial by error is probably the number one. The other half of it is probably liaising with partners and people, having conversations with coaches or industry partners, and or writing or editing. I do a lot of the checking of statistics, checking of data analyses that my students probably do the first draft of, and I might edit their code, recheck their stats. They often write a first draft and I edit drafts. So I tend to be the editor of that and the double checker. The students write first drafts, and then the other half of it is on the ground. So that's probably my day-to-day, but I'm pretty lucky in having that approach. I teach online, which frees up a lot of my day-to-day time to be able to be in the lab.
One of the great parts about our job is that that not too many days are actually the same. So we can sort of be tackling a different problem on one day, and then later in the week we'll be looking at something completely different. So some of that is very much centered around biomechanics, and I guess you could call it hardcore biomechanics or true biomechanics. Other areas we end up collaborating with other groups frequently, with other sports science disciplines, but also with people like engineers, with physios, doctors. So yeah, depending on the day, it depends on how much true biomechanics I guess we're doing. Sometimes it's just about being a good member within a multidisciplinary team as well. So it's not all about just doing biomechanics day in, day out. It's actually how we fit within a larger unit of people that are all working towards the same overarching goal, which is really about trying to improve the performance of the athletes around us.
Yeah, so usually a fair part of the role is problem solving a little bit. So I'm fortunate that when we're working with our coaches, and I've worked with several over numerous years, that they come to you with a problem or a challenge with that they want to improve an athlete's performance, or if a major injury has happened, how do we rehab them, but also prevent it from happening again, or trying to work out how it happened. So usually you'll get this challenge or problem. So it could be, an athlete struggling with their block start, or the weakest part of their race is over the first 30 meters. So how do you make that change? So then you look at a little bit what suits or is going to work for that athlete and narrow down where the elements are. So sometimes it will be out at training, getting measurement in the block set up, looking at how they're actually driving out, having a conversation with the coach about what they're trying to achieve, but also what the athlete's feeling. Sometimes if it's more in the gait mechanic space, you've got an athlete in the lab every 6 weeks doing Vicon assessment, force plate, looking at how their movement is working and whether the elements that they've put into their S&C program or the prehab program is achieving what they want to achieve. And if it's not creating the right stimulus, how do we create that stimulus for that athlete so that it works well? So usually that's a round table with the performance team. Sometimes it's out at a high jump session, looking at takeoff point and the timing and the cadence of the run up and the rhythm of the run up. So it's a little bit different each day, gets very tailored towards an athlete's event group, which is great. And sometimes it will be like a coach will go, I'm really keen to get this number or understand this better. What are the options? How do we actually achieve that? And that's usually then going, okay, thinking about what's going to specifically work for them, looking how that might have impact or change. And sometimes it's engaging with others outside your network, because sometimes, and in a service type role, you don't have time to come up with new and exciting things all the time, because there's always another coach wanting something new. So like in the discus event group, being able to get separation angles. So, with IMUs and technology advancements, that can now be a way of being able to get it in field, and rather than bringing an athlete in the lab, which then changes how they approach things in the circle, being able to get in field measurement. But we actually need to then tap into some engineers that understand how that technology can, work together, but scripting and, the magnetic field influences, where we can't go super in depth as much as we would like, and we can sometimes get the numbers, but is it providing trust in those numbers? So that's where collaborations are really key, or tapping into machine learning to streamline a lot of our information and to be able to turn around things quicker for coaches is a key one or element. So it's very different day to day. There's a lot of different technologies, particularly in athletics. So we'll use things like a laser, OptiJump, Vicon, force plate, camera setups, 2D calibration. So it's all very targeted towards what works for that event group or that athlete and coach or that DTE setup. Like I know some of our setups, like a block setup, if you're just doing video analysis, you're just using 2 cameras, whereas a javelin setup is like an 8-camera analysis setup with 20 centimeter taped calibration points between each one. So it's very different and very specific to the event group and athlete, which is great. But it keeps us on our toes all the time. Sometimes you'll usually get a random phone call from a coach going, I've had this problem, this has happened, what do you think? How do you think we should change that or approach it? And it's good. It creates a conversation, and it also means that you have good conversations with your performance team as well about how to challenge or think about things outside the box. And it's something that we always have a conversation with our network, the network that we lead from a biomech perspective, about, okay, so coaches come to us with this. Has anybody else had that? How should we approach it? What do you think? Or someone's seen something that's worked quite well in another event group, and it might have good applications to their event group that they're trying to work with. So it's kind of handy from that point of view. From a competition perspective, things are very different because you, particularly domestically compared to internationally. So domestically, we can go into the infield and be able to capture a lot of data, but we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't work as a team. So when you've got Track Classic, which is sort of in Australia, one of our biggest events, is like on a 2-hour, 3-hour window at night, with every event group running at the same time, we work as a team to be able to capture the information that's critical to our athletes. So, and without universities with students that are keen, we wouldn't be able to do that. So, you know, we'll have Trenton, who works with QAS, out there with TrackMan at discus, with multiple cameras set up. We'll have Aaron on laser at the pole vault to get velocity measurements. We'll also have the day before taped up the track every 10-meter increments to be able to get our timings through the segments, but also our stride lengths and stride frequencies. So we're very fortunate from that perspective, where without the team of the biomechs around the network, we wouldn't be able to provide what we're able to provide to the coaches and athletes. And competition, it's usually every week. So you're out there every weekend, usually at weird and wonderful hours, hoping that it doesn't rain, so that you're not duct taping Coles bags around cameras so that they're not sitting in a puddle of water. So it keeps things really interesting, but it keeps us engaged, and the coaches really see value in it, which is great. But it means that we're out there some weird and wonderful hours, as always with high performance sport. So it's not a 9-to-5 job, but it's great. Wouldn't change it. So yeah.
Oh, I think it's really important. I mean, ultimately we're a speed, power-based sport. So, I mean, improving running mechanics comes to the fore all the time. You're sort of trying to push envelopes of speed and power. And probably the best way to mitigate that against injury is improve their running mechanics. So we are often always trying to break down running cycles or running gaits, how people move when changing direction, how people move when they're off the ground and they're getting back to their feet. So, you know, it formulates a massive part of our programming. And then obviously, whether it be a bottom up or a top down approach, when you're assessing them from a musculoskeletal perspective, we're trying to sort of work out, I guess, primary, secondary, and tertiary factors that may influence injury or might prevent injury. And you know, the physio staff, the medical staff, and S&C is trying to always think like that. So it's a massive part of, I guess, the practical implementation. I don't know how well it's often done, but I think it's really important. I think particularly in female sports, you can see the number, particularly around ACL injuries, there are in a lot of non-contact and contact sports. So being able to understand that and help, not saying that you can prevent them all, as you don't, but you can certainly try and help prepare them for the vigors or the rigors of the sports and the demands of it. So that from I guess a locomotive perspective is really important, the biomechanics. And then, you know, the non-locomotive stuff in rugby is the collisions. So tackling, cleaning out, being at the breakdown, those type of things are important as well. So you sort of try again to, you know, people that might not have grown up tackling or playing a collision sport, you're trying to teach them skills. So that's where, again, it's really important to, for the safety, but also from a performance perspective, being able to defend. And in a game of 7 people on the field, 70 metres, the width of the field, there's a lot of space. So people being able to run and then tackle effectively is an important part of the game. Obviously, stating the obvious there, but being able to provide an environment where they can get feedback for that's important as well.
So does that mean you've mentioned your GPS and those kind of tools? Do you do videoing of those movements that you mentioned before, or is there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that your main tool?
Lots of video analysis, and then there's some different apps, some running apps, technology around how do you break it down. Just looking at like foot strike and hip function, flexibility, trunk control, those type of things. I touched upon it before. Dean Benton and John Pryor, who are my mentors and bosses in the athletic space at rugby, they provide a really good sounding board, and they give great advice around how to look at things differently. So you're sort of there, and then it's just you're trying to develop your own expertise or nuances around it, and I guess each person moves or needs different solutions to their movement challenges or problems. So you're sort of trying to, I guess, categorize it and identify it, and then probably try and provide some solutions to it. So it's fascinating. I think I was never fast. I always felt like I was slow. So I've sort of been searching to be fast for 20 odd years. So it becomes a real passion. How do you get people to move faster? And so, you use all those technologies, I guess, to give you an integrated solution.
Yeah, amazing. I've been trying to figure out how to move fast myself, and let me know if you figure that one out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we obviously I've got a clinical load that I sort of manage, and then what we do is we schedule sort of testing windows along the way. So for example, someone who's coming back from like a lower limb injury, we'll generally go sort of more general themes, generic themes up to a certain point. So we'll get them up to the point where they're doing straight line running, they're tolerating sort of a certain amount of volume. Then the biomechanics aspect really becomes about dose response after that. So we've got sort of generic themes that we're sort of targeting there. And then when they're sort of bit over half to getting close to that sort of 3/4 mark is when we start doing that. So we sort of have this carousel of people who are, unfortunately getting injured. Then they kind of get up to that point where we're sort of getting to that kind of 3/4 mark. We're testing them, then writing trying to set up programs in terms of the run home, and then ultimately trying to get some evidence of normality before we kind of cut them loose. So it's really the testing part for me is then scheduling it in a way that is structured with their rehab.